No one will argue, or no good leader is going to argue with the need to change, the need to innovate, the need to be more digital. What I sort of love about Catalyst and what I focus on is showing people how to change. So how to think differently about the way they work and the way they think about things, because those are the obstacles that you've got to overcome to really be an effective catalyst.
Hi, I'm Shannon Lucas.
And I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And we're the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to catalyzing innate change makers to accelerate positive change. This is our podcast,
Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out,
where we highlight catalysts that are creating amazing change in the world. In this season of the podcast, we are diving deep into the skills that make catalysts successful. And I'm so thrilled today to have Amy Radin with us. She's a catalyst and a pathfinder who, throughout 25-year corporate career, integrated market insights, data analytics, and technologies to help brands, including American Express, Citi, and AXA, establish and grow strong customer relationships. She's passionate about connecting the dots between technology trends, customer expectations, business models, and results, very importantly. She's the award-winning author of The Changemakers Playbook, How to Seek, Seed, and Scale Innovation in Any Company. And I have to say, I read almost the entire thing on one plane ride. It is an absolutely fantastic book. I actually think about it as a sort of compendium to our book. It's very focused also on the how. And Amy currently advises enterprises and startup clients on marketing, digital, and customer experience transformation. She participates on the front line of what's next as a limited partner in the Soundboard Venture Fund, an early stage collaborative fund investing in great founders. It is so lovely to have you here today.
It's great to be here, and I am just thrilled that we found each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, building on that, let's start off by you explaining how you relate to the concept of catalyst.
I love the concept of catalyst, and since I was a literature major in college, when I find a word I'm really interested in, I go to the dictionary and look it up. And the thing about catalysts, make change happen, but they also, according to catalysts in the world of science, make things happen faster. And I think today that for me, having spent most of my career in big, highly regulated, somewhat bureaucratic organizations, where change can be glacial unless there's a crisis and then things erupt in chaos. Time is really money today. And, no one will argue, or no good leader is going to argue with the need to change, the need to innovate, the need to be more digital. What I sort of love about Catalyst and what I focus on is showing people how to change. So how to think differently about the way they work and the way they think about things, because those are the obstacles that you've got to overcome to really be an effective catalyst.
And I'm so curious, I hadn't given you this question ahead of time, but people should go check out your website and your LinkedIn book. I mean, you really have been an early thought leader in really big companies. And I'm just wondering, how does being able to identify as a catalyst now contextualize all of the stuff that you did as that really tip of the spear transformational leader?
Yeah, well, I give a lot of advice to my former self, because I certainly, I fell into this kind of work, years ago when I was at Citi and I was leading the digital transformation of the credit card business. My CEO called me into his office one day and he said, well, I want you to make us more innovative because we're not innovative and we need to be innovative. And it's like, okay, does he think I'm really smart, or did I just draw the short straw? But I like a challenge. I love complexity. But I was a career marketer. Now, I came from the world of direct marketing. The strength of that and the foundation of direct marketing is experimentation. And so I kind of grabbed onto that as an anchor, because I said, well, if you're going to innovate, you have to experiment. But I built a team and we really learned through trial and error. How do you take an extremely proud, highly successful business, which at the time we grew to 100 million customers, so one of the world's largest consumer brands, generating at the time 25% of Citigroup's earnings, a company with a leadership team that, it was all about the quarter, or, how do you enter that kind of environment and create change in a way that doesn't feel threatening?
Yeah.
And really tapped into, my team, we really tapped into our roots in direct marketing, the culture around direct marketing and deep analytics to start to drive experiments that went beyond the bounds of incrementally, how do we increase our response rate in direct mail? But to say, what happens when you introduce a digital experience on top of a phone and mail experience? Or, what happens, all kinds of questions, what happens when, that went beyond the bounds of the current business model.
I hope our listeners can just appreciate the scale, because your bio that I just read does not do justice to the amount of innovation and impact that you've had, and really what a trailblazer. Not all catalysts are trailblazers in the way that you are. So thank you on behalf of catalysts who came behind you, like myself, for starting to blaze those trails. So as you talk about the massive impact that you've had as a catalyst, what are some of the one or two essential skills that had helped you, or maybe were there times that you failed because you didn't have one of these skills?
Yeah, I think for me, I have always been, to me, I always go back to the customer, so being incredibly the customer or the prospect. So going back to, all right, who do we want to serve, and what are their issues, expressed and unexpressed, emotional and rational, and how can I address those needs in the context of a viable business model? So I think for me, it's that discipline of always going back to the customer or the prospective customer and understanding them at a very deep level. And, I find with almost all of the companies I work with now, first of all, I've never met a CEO who didn't think their business was customer focused, but most businesses aren't. And I think for me, I grew up, my dad owned a corner drugstore. And when you're in a family owned business, it's your success, like food on the table is, money in the cash register is, are you really taking care of your customers? And so, I have a top school MBA. I've worked for some of the world's greatest global brands. That's all good. So much of what I understand about are you really serving your customers and understanding their needs goes back to working behind the counter at my dad's store. And a lot of companies just don't understand what that means, or the people or the metrics are set up in a way that there's not a clear connection between how I'm serving my customers, what behaviors and sense of loyalty that engenders around my brand, and how that translates into my financial and other business objectives. So I think the other thing is that focus on understanding the customer. And I think the other thing that really has helped me is a focus on the metrics. I am not a statistician. I am not a great finance person, but I had a boss years ago who gave me a great piece of advice. Surround yourself with people who know how to do things that you don't know how to do, and who like to do the things that you don't like to do. And so I have always surrounded myself with just great analytic talent, and people who wanted to really look for the deep story and the truth in the data, not just report. And so I think that's another skill that's really, really important. And it's just finding the people who you can partner with and helping the organization realize that the traditional metrics of a mature business can bring down a catalyst great idea. So, ROI on a new concept, forget it. That's just not going to work. So I think that focus on the customer and focus on the metric talent and getting to the metrics that are appropriate for a catalyst to sort of track their success. Those two things to me have been key, and they are often missing when I go into work with clients today.
They really are. And it is interesting, as a catalyst, the customer focus one, I hear so many times catalysts say, yeah, but the salesperson won't let me talk to the customer, or whatever. I have to say,
had that.
tell people to ask for forgiveness after the fact, because I'm usually also talking to different, better customers, and they're talking to IT and procurement or something, and you're talking to like the head of a business unit. How do you overcome that resistance? And can you give an example when that customer focus really led the transformation?
Yeah, well, I have a great story about that. And first of all, I love your comment about forgiveness, because I had one of the other great pieces of advice I got years ago from a division president at American Express was ask forgiveness, not permission. And I've definitely, catalysts can be glass breakers. And
break it. Yep.
Yeah, and that's just it. And you have to pick your spots and know when it's time to, throw a rock through the window and just challenge things. But I worked with a client a couple of years ago who they wanted me to come in and help them with marketing strategy. They've never really had, it's very sales driven, product push tech company, have never really had like real marketing, the way you or I would think about it. And I said, okay, that's a great project. I'd like to talk to some of your customers. And the director of sales for a couple of months blocked me from talking to customers. And I went back to it's a family-owned business with 3 co-owners. And I said, well, I can't help you. That the whole basis for marketing is understanding the customer's perspective. And so, and I was like, and I stand behind my work. I'm not going to that's my brand, right? And I know what it takes to do a good job. And so I was like, sorry. So eventually they came back, and then the salespeople want to put a lot of control over who I'd be allowed to talk to. And so we just, set some criteria. Fine not to talk to really unhappy people, although they don't think they had any unhappy customers, but we defined parameters that ensured I would have a range. And out of just a series of 8 or 9, 1-hour conversations with clients, I was able to help them develop hypotheses about brand positioning and helped unpack for them why people really worked for them, which it turned out was not so much about the technology, which of course a tech company, that's what they thought, and more about customers felt that the company had their back.
Nice.
And would not let them down. And as a result of the work that we did, they launched a new product line that they've exceeded their goals, and they now feel they can double or triple the overall size of the company.
Wow.
So just what was great about the project was the result, the insights, but also help them see through, by demonstrating it, the power of deep listening.
Yes.
Did
they maintain that? Did they maintain that skill after you moved on?
Well, they are actually. Now we're working on. So now they've asked me to help them recruit a marketing director, and so so I'm helping them build the function. They are very interested in establishing customer roundtables. They want to really focus on how do we engage the entire organization in the customer, in developing the right customer experience. And not that sales isn't really important, but every employee in a company, like in a tech company, touches customer experience, right? Sales, customer support, product developers, UI, UX. And so how do you get people they're very interested to get people on working against the common vision of what the customer experience should be, because they're understanding how much that is a differentiator and how they have to execute differently and learn new skills and frameworks in order to, realize that objective. So it's very exciting, but it takes time for people to wrap their heads around a different way of operating.
It does. It really does. And it's such a great example though, because it's like the clarity of, I can't be successful if I can't talk to the customers. And I think it's also an interesting thing to the catalyst to be like, look, you might have to gain some trust first. So if you get the win of, here's the guardrails of the people I'm going to let you do round 1 so that I can show you the impact, which I think is a really interesting pivot to talking about results and metrics, because one of the things, it's so funny because looking back, the intuitive, the things I wish I had known, like when you talk about telling your earlier self the advice, it's like how, when there's something that's net new and the old metrics don't work, what would your advice be maybe to your younger self, or what was a time where you were able to come up with new metrics that meaningfully helped people understand the value of the work that you were doing?
Yeah. A couple of things. First of all, when you're a catalyst or in any kind of a big change role in a big bureaucracy, it's pretty lonely.
Yes.
So I early on realized that I had to build a strong outside network and identify outside resources to who I could look to for advice. And even sometimes it's just a daily reminder that, like, I'm not crazy. So, and today with social media, it's so easy to do that. So LinkedIn, just simple Google searches can find. So, and I find catalysts are really keen to help each other because
totally
they're lonely too.
Yes.
So I have a global network, and when I'm stuck, I've always done this. It's like, well, who can I ask? Like, how did you do it in your company?
Yeah.
And so that's a great tactic. You don't have to hire consultants to solve these problems. Just find a person who's in similar shoes and say, like, how did you handle it? And most people are happy to help. The other thing is I built a very strong partnership internally with our decision analyst team. And, working in a credit card business, which is where I was at Citi, that business has always been powered by decision science, even before we knew the word internet.
Right.
And so deep base of talent and building trust and relationships with a few people who had that skill set, but who saw the opportunity to apply their skills towards defining a future, not, oh, let's just build another pricing model, but let me figure out, people with the intellectual curiosity to figure out some new answers to new tough questions. And so that internal partnership was really important. And also for me and my team politically, it was a big deal because they had so much credibility in the organization. They were viewed as sort of the objective arbiters of the truth. They had no stake in the answer as long as it was the truth. And so I had the skills, the credibility builders, and the trust to help us really define the experiments to answer very new questions. And so I'm working with a financial institution today in the UK, and we've defined a customer experience vision that's incredibly, I think for them, a real breakthrough. And now we're getting into, all right, how do we pilot a few use cases so we can get the organization to learn how to do this, but also to build faith that this matters. And so I'm like, okay, so who's the analyst on your team? Like, who are the resources who are going to make sure the test is set up in a way that others in the organization will see it as valid, and who will anticipate, oh yeah, we can actually get the data to read the results. Because when you're in a legacy company with old infrastructure, like 80% of the analytic battle is just knowing where to excavate to get the data. Yeah. And so you need that skill. You need those people on the team from the get-go, because they are really important to legitimizing the work that your team is doing. So for me, that's always been critical.
I love that so much. I love the, and interestingly, we find catalysts everywhere. Like I found some amazing, data/analyst catalysts out there that are excited to use the data to help the company actually grow in different ways. And I want to just share an example. One of the things that I've done is bringing together that customer focus and the focus on results, because like one of the early day innovation things that we did was these innovation workshops. And going back to what I said, most of our org was selling to IT and procurement. And I was bringing in the CMO, the heads of business lines, even the CEOs of these massive organizations. So the first data that I had was just, I've been able to understand the highest levels of our biggest customers, get them in a room and co-create together. And so that also became the metric, right? And so then it starts to build on each other, the intersection of those things. I just want to acknowledge that you said earlier, the self-awareness that you had to say, this isn't a superpower of mine. I know that's not going to intimidate me though. I'm just going to bring the talent on, like the business analyst that you were talking about. Which is a superpower. But I just want to ask you a question, because I think for a lot of people, particularly like, women and the BIPOC community who are in organizations who don't stand in the same sort of centeredness and power, it can be really scary to say that you don't know something early on in your career. That imposter syndrome can be so loud, right? And so how, as an early stage catalyst, do you raise your hand and say, actually, I need support on this. This isn't my superpower?
No, I think I was really lucky to get that advice early in my career, but surrounding myself with diverse teams. And, there's a lot to be said for just speaking with confidence and conviction. I'm pretty practical, and I knew that, I know I'm not a technologist. I know I'm not a statistician. What I am is a person, I'm an integrator, and I'm really, really good at making sure that the customer perspective is informing what we're doing, and that the team is connecting the customer perspective to the business model. And so I'm seeing that entire picture and knitting together. But I also want to go home at night. In addition to my career, I had a very long commute for 25 years. We have 3 children. So that's the practical side of it, is like, I'm going home at night.
That's nice.
And so I want to be with my family. So it's like, so building a team was a practical, personal consideration. And I think if you are even a midlife, I think everybody in an organization is a leader, no matter what level you are. I think there's a leader, lowercase l. And if you're a catalyst, no matter what level you're at, just assume that the better people in the organization sort of know that the company has to change. They see the future. And when they see somebody step up and take some steps forward to lead toward the necessary future, they're going like, thank God. And you can get people to follow you.
Yeah.
So if you just test your ability to lead, even in small ways, people will start to raise their hand, and you will build you'll start to build, even unwittingly, what I call the coalition of the willing.
That's right.
And but you have to have a little courage. You have to have some courage.
That's it. You have to have the courage. And I think what we try and help catalysts understand is you having the self-awareness and asking for the support that you need to make whatever change you are leading with a lowercase l can take courage, but it's also a signal to the organization about you're standing in your confidence and your self-awareness. And if that is not respected in the organization, then there's a different conversation to be had. I'm going to pivot us to though.
Absolutely. I just want to say that point. People talk, people talk about having, especially women, about having a seat at the table. You have to make sure you're at the right table.
That's right.
And really assess what is it that gives you joy in your work, and what's the environment where you can do your best work and feel successful and happy. And then you've got to do some sizing up of make sure you're in an environment where there's enough of the good stuff that you can get traction and be successful. And if there isn't, then find a different environment.
Amen. What are your biggest challenges as a catalyst leader today?
My biggest challenges today, they're the same challenges they've always been. It's, 2. One is the personal challenge, which is helping, I'm different. Sometimes I look back and I go, how was I successful in the corporate world for so many years? Because I was so often so out of the mold. And so helping people, conveying the value that I bring and why having someone like me in the mix is so important. And I still, it's really hard sometimes to have non-catalysts appreciate why it's really important for them to have a catalyst in the mix. And I'm still working on perfecting ways to do that. So always looking for advice. With my current clients, it's the same issue. It's always been, which is helping people overcome their fear of change and not take personally that what made them successful till this point, what got you here isn't going to get you there. And realizing that they have to kind of learn and unlearn and relearn skills and mindset to be successful.
Yeah,
so
and I have to give, those are brilliant. I just want to say, okay, for our listeners, you have to go look at Amy's LinkedIn site. It'll be in the show notes. When you look at what she's accomplished and you hear Amy say that she still struggles to articulate her values sometimes, it's like it should be a breath of fresh air for so many catalysts, because this is so hard, right? It is so hard for us to convey.
Really hard.
And I love the overcoming the fear of change. And I just have to give a shout out to Aidan McCullen, who connected us, and his book Undisruptible is such a great lesson in unlearning things and continuing to disrupt ourselves. And it's hard. I mean, like people mostly don't like change. And so we end up in really tough spots. Thank you for those. I want to move us into the rapid fire round if you're ready.
Sure.
What is one thing that you do to get ready for a big meeting?
Yeah, that's a great question. I really try to make sure ahead of time that I'm going to have a few advocates in the room.
Nice one.
So I think back to, senior team meeting that, being on the XCOM of different organizations. If I was going to go in and present some recommendation or look for a decision, really important to scope out individual perspectives ahead of time. Listen to the disagreeers, non-supporters, and understand them, be empathetic, but make sure that there's a couple of people who are going to be there to be supportive.
Such strong advice for catalysts. Yes, the work that goes on before the actual meeting. What's your favorite way to spend a free day?
With no plans. I also laughed when I saw this question. I have been so overscheduled for my entire, post college and graduate school life, between my job, my commute, my traveling, my family. I just love having a day that is completely unplanned. If the weather's good, if it's summer, head to the beach with a good book. We live about an hour from the Jersey Shore. If the weather's not good, just do something around the house that improves the aesthetics of our environment. But I love having I crave having no plans.
I'm totally with you. All right, your favorite famous catalyst, dead or alive, and why?
Yeah, it's a dead person. And because his lab was about 20 minutes from where I live, but Thomas Edison. When you look at everything that's written today about what does it take for a founder to be successful, and what are the success factors for an innovator, he had it all. I've been to his lab many times, and when you really read the stories of who he surrounded himself with, how he empowered the people working in the lab to just sort of tinker. The fact that he kept on hand like thousands of material samples so that people could just like fool around with the stuff. He was a prototyper. He knew that success came from hundreds, if not thousands, of failures. So to me, he's the total package, a real role model who, even though he lived in another century, was a forerunner of what it takes to be a great catalyst in this era.
It's such a good one. And it's so true. Like when you think back, like very few people still, even with all our design thinking conversations and all of that stuff, very few, especially founders and leaders, show up with that level of fail tolerance and almost desirability to push through. So thank you for bringing him back into conversation. That's such a great one.
Yeah, if you're ever in West Orange, you visit his his lab. It's really quite inspiring just to walk around and like sort of internalize how the guy operated.
I'm going to put that on my list. Yes. Do you have a call to action for our listeners?
Yeah, look, I'd love it. I'm just relaunched my website. I'd love it if you want to learn more about me. Go to amyradin.com. Follow me on LinkedIn. I'm out there multiple times during the week, and pick up a copy of my book, The Changemakers Playbook.
I'm going to second that. I loved reading your book. Like I said, it was like one of those ones on the plane where I was like, I couldn't put it down. So Amy, so good to talk with you. Thank you so much for being here with us.
A real pleasure. Really enjoyed the conversation. Good luck with all of your work helping Catalyst, Shannon. You're doing an awesome job.
Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, go to our website at catalystconstellations.com. And of course, don't forget to check out our book, also Move Fast, Break Shit, Burn Out. And if you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button and send the link their way. Thanks for listening.